What's up, guys? I'm BTC. A new PTR patch is arriving pretty soon. The Overwatch devs have already started to tell us some of the things that we can expect. What I already covered yesterday was the nerf to Baptiste's immortality field. Jeff Kaplan did mention this, though he didn't give any specifics, so we don't know if it's going to be an increase in cooldown or a reduction in the field size or the health or the duration or any of that. There's a whole bunch of things that they could do. It is possible that Baptiste could be getting more changes as well. Another one of the Overwatch devs made a couple of forum posts, and I'll cover those in a second here. But in one of those posts, he also talked about how Baptiste and Mei are going to be getting some changes as well. Now, he could have just been referring to the immortality field, but I have a feeling that if they're going to nerf Baptiste, it's probably going to be more than just the immortality field. I mean, it's possible they could even nerf his damage because he does do quite a bit. As for Mei, I'm not really sure what kind of changes they could make. Yeah, they could lower her damage or increase the time to get frozen, but those aren't really the main issues with the character. See, the thing is, prior to the 222 roll queue system, Mei was almost never used. She was a niche pick and had an incredibly low pick rate, but after the 222 system was added, suddenly she became super popular. And one of the reasons, there's a bunch of different stuff, and I probably need to talk about this more in another video, but one of the reasons why Mei suddenly became super popular was because she kind of functions like a tank. She's not exactly, but the thing is, we went from Goat's Comp, which was triple tank, and now we could only have two, but then you also have DPS characters like Reaper and Mei, who had very high or extra health for a DPS anyways, and they also had really good sustainability. So they weren't quite tanks, but they were kind of like tank lights, right? Like half a tank. With Mei, maybe she's more like 80% tank, right? So you have 222, but you still have that extra character taking a damage slot that kind of functions in a similar way. She's got the ice block to keep herself alive, she's got the wall to area control and all that sort of stuff, and again, I probably need to talk about this in another video, but there are bigger issues than just how much damage Mei does. Another character that's getting a change is D.Va, though they did tell us what's happening with her. The boosters are going from a 5-second cooldown down to 3 seconds, which is probably going to make her the most mobile character in the entire game. Yes, Hammond has a lot of mobility. His grapple is still on a 5-second cooldown, though. With D.Va boosters on 3 seconds, it means she can boost in, use Defense Matrix to keep herself safe. Then once she gets to where she needs to, she can start attacking, use the micro missiles, and then 3 seconds later, she can boost back out. I don't know if this is really going to be the thing that fixes the character. I think there's probably a little bit more that still needs to be done, but this is just an absolutely ridiculous amount of mobility. As I said at the beginning of the video, there are a couple of forum posts that Josh No, one of the Overwatch developers, made about the characters, balancing, pick rates, win rates, that sort of stuff. So after I read those, I went and I checked some of the pick rates, and before I go over the forum posts, I have to show you this. Because every now and again, when I check the pick rates, I always look to see who's at the bottom, and it's the same character every single time. It's Bastion, and he always has this hilariously bad pick rate. But this one in particular, I mean, just look at it for yourself. I don't know how anyone can look at this character, look at the pick rate, and still insist, yep, Bastion's doing good. He doesn't need any changes, doesn't need a rework. He's just great the way he is. No, he's not. He's garbage. And I don't say that because I hate the character. I say it because I hate seeing a character who has a pick rate that's almost in the 1000th decimal place. That shouldn't ever happen. Even during the height of the double barrier, before the nerfs, Bastion was still one of the least played characters in the entire game. Yes, I know he was used in the pro scene, that's a different animal. But after the nerfs came out for the barriers, I saw a bunch of people saying, oh, Bastion's gonna be super good now. No, he's not. He's garbage. He's even less useful because you don't need a barrier break character when pretty much any of the DPS and some of the tanks can already break the barriers. Like, why would you ever need a Bastion when a Hanzo or a McCree can do just as good destroying that barrier? Like, you just don't need Bastion. The same argument can be made for Junkrat as well, right? You don't need a barrier break specialist if everybody can break the barriers. In conclusion, Bastion is garbage and needs to be reworked. Moving on, over on the official forums, Josh No, one of the developers, made a couple of long posts answering player questions. The initial post that he was responding to had a really weird question that didn't kind of make any sense. It said, please nerf power creep instead of nerfing support heroes. You can't nerf power creep. I see this a lot. Overwatch players seem to misuse the terminology, whether it's a pick or a C9 or whatever. In this case, it's power creep. Power creep cannot be nerfed or buffed. Power creep is the result of ever incremental buffs to the game. Basically, new stuff gets added and the old characters need to be brought up to speed with the new stuff, so there's this constant kind of little leapfrogging effect where things get a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger, a little bit stronger. That's what power creep is. You can't nerf or buff power creep. I want to quickly put this out there. Josh, if you happen to watch this video, please understand, it's not that I hate you. It's nothing personal. I'm not trying to attack you. But some of the stuff that you say is wrong. And I have an obligation and a responsibility to myself, to my viewers, to you, and to Blizzard to point it out. Because the fact is, if something's wrong, it's not going to get improved. It's not going to get changed. It's not going to be made for the better unless you point it out. Please don't ban me. But going on to Josh's post, he started with dropping by with a fun fact. Looking at GM players for the current patch 1.43, Genji and Soldier 76 are number 6 and number 7 in terms of win rate for damage heroes out of 16 total. They're not doing quite as poorly as the general community sentiment would imply. Game balance, perceptions, and opinions are often repeated and perpetuated enough that they start to become accepted as fact by many players. Okay, I need to address each of these posts like piece by piece. What he just said is completely wrong. Like, that is hilariously wrong. Sure, Genji and Soldier 76 might have high win rates, but they have bad pick rates. Soldier is one of the least used characters in the game. Genji is floated on his pick rate, and the reason why it's not in the absolute bottom of the gutter is because Genji is a cool character. He's a cyborg ninja with a dragon sword. A lot of people think he's cool, he's popular, they want to play him. That is why Genji is used as often as he is. I talked about this in a previous video. He's kind of in a weird situation where he's not a good character at all in the current state of the game, but he still has a decent pick rate because he's cool and people want to play the cyborg ninja with a dragon sword. So essentially what happens is, this is the same thing that we see with other characters like Symmetra, Torbjorn, Bastion. They have high win rates and low pick rates. And the reason for that is because they are incredibly niche characters that are only used in very specific situations, or they're used by one-tricks who don't care that the character is terrible, they just want to play the character, and because they end up winning matches with it, it kind of offsets the win rate stuff for it. So when you see a character with a low pick rate and a high win rate, which is exactly what Genji, well, Soldier 76 and Genji to a lesser degree, what these characters have, that's a bad thing. This is not good. It's not that it's just being kind of, you know, repeated by the players. There's a reason why you don't see Genji being used. There's a reason why you don't see Soldier being used, is because they are objectively worse than their counterparts. You don't need to use a Genji, you can use a Doomfist or a Tracer, and they'll be better in almost every situation. You don't need to use Soldier, because you can use Hanzo or Widow, or even McCree, and they're going to be better in almost every single situation. Like, this isn't a situation of people like, oh, they're just repeating things that they heard. No, the characters are actually bad. And pretending that it's not doesn't change the fact. Continuing with Josh, he said, we should also remember that things like win rates and hero power effectiveness can fluctuate significantly depending on the player's skill level. If someone complains that Reaper is too strong and another says that Reaper is too weak, they could both be correct for their current skill level. This is true. This is absolutely accurate. You see this with certain characters like Torbjorn and Bastion. In the upper brackets, they're just garbage and almost worthless, but in the lower brackets, you can find that a Bastion can be effective. A Torbjorn turret can be effective. Not always. I mean, even in the lower brackets, Bastion and Torb still have very low pick rates. But the argument that there's a different strength to the characters depending on the skill level, depending on where they are in the bracket, is absolutely true. Continuing on, when making balance changes, we typically look at the high-end potential of player skill for a hero, but also try to keep in mind if a given change would be a significant detriment to the overall gameplay experience in lower skill brackets and attempt to find a better solution if so. Really? Really now? That's what you do. So please explain why Reaper's lifesteal was buffed to 50%. So this was made during the height of Goats Comp. Blizzard was clearly trying to do something to weaken Goats Comp. Reaper is very much an anti-tank character, so they buffed his lifesteal to a ridiculous amount in order to make him a better pick against the triple tank in order to try to slow it down. The instant I saw this being put on the PTR, I said, this will have zero effect on Goats Comp. This will do absolutely nothing. People will still not use Reaper against Goats because he's just going to get run over by the triple tank with the triple support and the Lucio and the Brigitte behind them. This is going to do absolutely nothing in the upper bracket. It's going to do nothing to stop Goats Comp, but what it is going to do is it's going to completely destroy the lower bracket to the point where every single team will need to have a Reaper as one of their DPS. And guess what happened? Exactly what I predicted. It took me about 10 seconds of looking at the PTR notes in order to know that this was going to happen. So, no, that's not the case. Like, they definitely make changes, and they... Like, I don't understand. Like, how can you not look at that and say, oh, you know what? You know what? Reaper with a 50% lifesteal, that's gonna work totally fine in bronze, silver, and gold. He'll be fine. There's not gonna be any, what's the phrase he said? There's not going to be any significant detriment to the overall gameplay experience. Not at all. 50%. I mean, they did end up rolling it back. Even now, it's still probably too high. But, like, what? Okay, anyways. Moving on. He continues and says, I think in general, being wary of extreme power creep is a valid and healthy concern. If it's causing gameplay to become wildly distorted from the core experience, I don't feel that we're currently anywhere close to that with the live game. So, power creep is definitely an issue. And I kind of agree with him that it's not, like, completely destroying the game right now, but it is certainly unbalancing the game, and you do have characters like Soldier, like Genji, who are essentially the same that they were from the retail release of the game, right? Very little changes have been made, and they just can't keep up with the rest of the game. And I think a lot of this has to do with not the power creep for damage, but power creep from the healing, because at the beginning of the game, we had one healer, Mercy, and two off healers, Lucio and Zenyatta. Now, there is so much healing in the game from Moira, Bionades, Baptiste, all of this extra stuff, that the characters that initially were made to deal chip damage, like Genji and Soldier, they just can't keep up, because whenever they do even a little bit of damage, it's instantly healed, and they just can't be effective. Josh then went and made a second post where he kind of walks back some of the stuff a little bit, and I think this was in response to a lot of people pointing out kind of what I was saying about how win rates and pick rates are tied together, and the niche picks and the one tricks and all that sort of stuff. So he said, yes, pick rates are definitely important to consider when trying to interpret win rates. The win rates I'm looking at are from unmirrored competitive ladder stats, specifically PC players, 1.43, GM, MMR range, meaning games where the hero is not being actively played on both teams. We don't balance solely off of stats anyways, but they help inform us when something could be really out of whack or can give us a slightly more unbiased lens when trying to identify the root causes of gameplay issues. Stats don't do a great job of telling us subjective things like how fun something is. Player feedback does. So basically, you know, everybody that complains about playing against Mei, like, this isn't fun, like, obviously stats can't do that. He then continues by saying, we can try to infer a little bit of that from pick rate, but there are too many competing factors. The most common feedback I've been reading recently is that Baptiste and Mei are very overpowered, which isn't actually true. They're strong, yes, but they're not super overpowered like people are. There's a lot of exaggeration going on there. Anyways, continuing. There are some upcoming changes to these two as well, and Genji Soldier are clearly the weakest heroes. That's weird, because he says that clearly they're the weakest heroes, and yet in the previous post, he said, oh, they're not actually doing that bad, and oh, they're numbers 6 and 7. So he's obviously walking this back a little bit. When I looked into the current patch stats, Mei and Genji are both middle of the pack for GM, where I would normally expect players to adhere more closely to the meta. Again, I already explained this. Genji's pick rate is artificially floated by the fact that he's a popular character. It has nothing to do with his strength. There are only about 8 heroes with higher pick rates than Mei and Genji. Soldier pick rate is low, coming in at less than half of Genji's, and is on par with Ashe for both pick rate and win rate. So Soldier and Ashe have basically the same pick and win rate. One of the perceived strongest and one of the perceived weakest heroes have nearly identical pick rate and win rate. I think he's trying to compare Soldier and Ashe here. And is he implying that Ashe is considered a strong character? No, that's not the case at all. Ashe is not a good character. Ashe's pick rate is lower than Soldier's because they're both bad. Like, there's no reason to use either Soldier or Ashe. You use Hanzo or Widow, and if they have a Tracer or something, you use McCree. There's no reason to use either Soldier or Ashe. They're both bad characters. So if you're trying to say that one of the perceived strongest and weakest, no, they're both bad. They're both weak. Anyways, continuing, he says, I found this personally very interesting and wanted to share. It's wrong. That's not how it is. My post above was intended to get people to consider that this data, while not absolute or conclusive on anything on its own, may suggest off-meta heroes are much more viable on the competitive ladder than players tend to expect. That is not true. That is absolutely wrong. Characters are not used because they are bad. When you have other picks, like, you don't use Genji because Tracer is objectively better. Doomfist is objectively better. You don't use Soldier, you don't use Ashe because Widow, Hanzo, and McCree are objectively better. Like, there's no... You're putting your team at a disadvantage when you use these kind of off-meta characters. Like, this is frustrating. This is genuinely frustrating to read this right now. So, the more viable on the competitive ladder than players tend to expect, even at the highest level. Professional play is likely another story. Yes, I completely agree with him here. It's a different animal. You really can't compare that to what goes on in the competitive ladder. But as far as this other stuff, characters aren't used not because they're off-meta. They're not used because they are objectively worse than their counterparts. And that is a result of bad balancing in this game. It's been like this since the day it was released. There's always been a very top-heavy kind of pick rate where 6, 7, 8 characters are used because at that point in time, they are objectively, verifiably better than their counterparts. And that's how it's always been. Now, those top characters might shift around. It might go from, you know, Goats to Dive to Double Barrier to the Hanzo Grav type stuff. Like, it's gonna move around, yeah. But there's always those 6, 7 characters at the top that just control everything because the game is not properly balanced. Honestly, I just don't get this sometimes. It's almost like the developers are playing a different game than the rest of us. And maybe the stuff that they're talking about makes sense on the game that they're playing, but on the one that everyone else is playing, it just doesn't. I was all done editing this video when Josh made a third post, and in the interest of fairness, I think it's important to include that as well. So he said, hey, thanks for trying to clarify this, responding to everybody on the forums. I'm definitely hearing a ton of feedback over the last day and am learning a bunch from this experience. I came to share my personal viewpoint, listen to the community, and try to make the game better together. I'm truly not attempting to callously disregard anyone's concerns and say everything is fine. I'm aware there are distinct increases in power across several aspects of the game, such as raw healing output. Yes, thank you. The introduction of new heroes and mechanics, or things like Hammond's extreme mobility. I don't think this is inherently negative, as balance is relative across a large number of factors. There have also been losses of power, such as the recent barrier changes. The idea I was trying to express, and failed to clearly, his words, not mine, I'm not poking fun at him, is that I don't personally feel like there is an unreasonable amount of excessive power creep that makes the core gameplay not feel like Overwatch anymore. I would agree with him on that. For example, he says, Goat's comp was getting in that space for me, not necessarily due to individual hero power increases, but from the combined synergy of the comp moving away from feeling like an FPS. And again, I would agree. I also agree with the fact that there isn't like a massive amount of power creep in the game. It's definitely there, and I think it is mostly with the healing, which is why I keep saying we need more anti-healing in the game, right? It doesn't need to be full shut-off anti-healing like Ana's Bionade, but like 20%, 30%, you can build this into certain characters, certain types of abilities could have this, all these sorts of things. But anyways, so that is his third post. I don't know if he's going to make any more after this, and again, nothing personal. Some of the things he said in the other posts were wrong. It looks like he definitely recognized that. So what do you guys think about all this stuff? The buffs, the nerfs, and Blizzard's general opinion on power creep, let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.